Hello everyone, my name is Borax and I've been on a mission to play and rank every single champion in the support role. Today we'll be looking at Sylas, a champion that has been requested quite a bit and one that I've really looked forward to playing. Let's quickly go over his abilities and then find out why he could work as a support. Sylas has a passive that when he casts an ability, he gains stacks, up to 3, of something called Unshackled, which grants him 125% attack speed. Sylas' basic attacks will consume Unshackled and deal bonus damage to his primary target, as well as dealing damage to nearby enemies. Next he has his Q, where he lashes out 2 chains that will converge at his target location, dealing magic damage and slowing enemies' hit. After a 0.6 second delay, the chain's intersection will explode, dealing magic damage. Then Sylas has his W, where he dashes to his target's location, dealing magic damage. If the target is a champion, it also heals Sylas, which scales based on his missing health. He has his E, where upon activation, he dashes to a target location, and after a 0.2 second delay, but within 3.5 seconds, he can reactivate it to throw out his chains, which will stun the first enemy hit for 0.5 seconds, teleport Sylas to that location, then knock them up upon his arrival for 0.5 seconds. Finally, he has his ultimate, which is one of the coolest abilities in the whole game, as it lets him steal a copy of any enemy's ulti and will scale with his ability power even if the ability normally only scales with AD. This also means that his ultimate will only be as strong as the champions he is facing, but thankfully, a lot of enemy supports do have strong ultimate abilities. Sylas Support has always popped up as a favorite amongst off-meta enjoyers, including some pro players. But is he actually somewhat viable? Well, let's find out together, as I rate Sylas, the Unshackled, on his ability to be played in the support role.
So, who wants to kill the king?
In the early game, I like to rate a support's ability to invade, lane, and roam. The best tool to have in an invade is a hook, as it's usually longer range CC that also pulls an enemy towards your team. Sylas E kind of functions in the same way, except that you get pulled into the enemy team instead. It's a nice amount of CC and has good range. Plus, you actually do a lot of damage with your passive, getting 2 procs thanks to your E having multiple parts. For invading, I will give Sylas an S-. It's very risky because if the enemy is waiting for you, then you can get blown up. But it can be very rewarding, as you'll be able to secure an early lead if someone is separated from their team. Now let's talk about laning, where I like to judge a champion based on 3 categories: poking, peeling, and all-inning. Sylas is a melee champion, so he shouldn't be that great at poking, right? Well, thanks to the existence of power creep and Sylas needing to be able to scrap with mid laners, he actually does a ton of damage with his combo if you can land it, especially if you run first strike and can get that bonus damage off. Sylas has a nice and easy trade pattern that all revolves around him hitting his E, which then lets you layer in some bonus damage from his passive, as well as a cheeky Q, and to make sure you guarantee win the trade, finish it off with his W to give you some health back and to deal even more damage. If you land E, his poke is incredible to the point where it's pretty much just all inning. But if you miss the E, you really want to hope that you don't wind up hitting a minion, as you won't have CC the enemy, but you'll be a perfect target for them. Usually what I like to do is just use the E dash to get past the minion wave for an easier stun, because as long as the minion wave isn't too big, your W healing is usually enough to out-sustain the incoming damage. For poking, I'll give Sylas an A. He has an amazing short trade pattern, but he can struggle with certain wave states and can easily be outranged or outplayed. Okay, I'll be honest, playing Sylas is a bit one-dimensional, so buckle up. If you can hit the chain, you are an absolute beast. If you miss it, you are far weaker, as you're lacking his major CC outside of the unimpressive Q slow. When you are playing Sylas, the way you frequently want to peel is by simply disposing of the enemies before they can dispose of you. If you have a bit of a lead, then it's surprisingly easy, as the champion just does so much damage. But if you are behind or the enemies bring everyone down, then you can struggle, as he doesn't have any shielding or guaranteed CC, so we'll give him a C- for peeling. Finally, all-inning, where, it's just poking, but instead of backing off after the trade, you keep going, and hope your Ignite or ADC can finish them off. If I talk about his ability to all-in within the categories of poking and peeling, then it must be strong, and it definitely is. I'm only going to give him an S here and leave off that plus, because if he is behind, he doesn't have the ridiculous amounts of CC that your best engaged supports will have, but if he is ahead, then he is a true terror in the bot lane and a pure delight to play. Now that we've talked about Sylas' laning prowess, Let's rate the matchups that he might have to face. Sylas as a support is actually super strong in lane, so he doesn't have too many terrible matchups in my opinion. The worst ones are the anti-melee supports that deal a bunch of damage with turrets so that they can win early on, and they don't have the best ultimates to steal. I think the only other really tricky champion would be Janna, Thresh, and Milio, as they have an easy way to cancel Sylas's dashes, so that if they are good, it will be no fun to fight them. The other engaged tanky supports can be a bit annoying, as you want to snowball as Sylas support, but if they take Aftershock, it will be difficult to shut them down. That being said, they do have nice ultimates for you to steal. Vel'Koz and Xerath could be easy if they don't space properly, or if you get ganks, but their range might be too much for you to handle. Most supports are relatively squishy, which is great for Sylas as he does a billion damage in the early game, so if you land all of your abilities, you can really blow these people up. He also doesn't have the longest cooldowns, so something like a Morgana Black Shield isn't too bad to deal with. Lastly, we have some champions I think Sylas can actually just be a better version of, as they have a lot of power in their ultimate. Swain and Alistar ultimates make Sylas ridiculously tanky. Taric and Zilean have such strong ultimates that the rest of their kit is a bit weaker, but Sylas gets the same access to that ult without compromising the rest of his kit. Lulu, Sona, Seraphine, and Renata all have powerful ultimates while also being super duper squishy and great targets to go for. Finally, we have a bunch of champions in the who plays these guys even, as I'm waiting to see people pick these characters in my games. But truthfully, a Sylas support would dominate most of these matchups. I actually need to start including Rel a bit more, even though realistically I see her once in every 100 games. Sylas does love playing against Rel though, because she has very decent AP scalings on her ultimate that he can utilize quite well. When it comes to what ADCs you want to play with, the answers are the ones who can go all in with you and just fully tribal the lane. I like Tristana, Kalista, and Samira for this, as you both have dashes and strong all-in potential. A good Draven would also be a decent lane, although him wanting all the kills might stunt your power level. The last combo I really enjoyed was Jhin Sylas, because if you can land that E, he can follow up with W, and you both do so much single target damage that they will be truly screwed. However, if your ADC is a useless bonobo, then you might want to consider roaming, so let's talk about that now. I think my love for the support role is dwindling ever so slightly because of how whiny ADCs have become if you ever leave their lane, and they have to give up 6 CS in exchange for your team getting 1 or 2 kills. But ADC complaints aside, if you can get a good roam timing off, then Sylas is nutty as a ganker. I mean, think about it. How many times have you seen a Sylas mid be down 20 CS, leave lane, and snag a couple of kills, and then be ahead? This champion just has so much mobility and damage, even from the support role. Here, I was able to 1v1 a Gnar top, who had a 3-level lead on me. And while yes, it is because he started off at half health, what other champion do you know that could do so, even after missing their E 2 times? For roaming, I will give Sylas an S+. While this might come as a surprise to some of you, as it admittedly surprised me too, Sylas is like a hook champion that is able to get over walls and vision while still having his hook ready. He also has his incredible ult, which gives him access to any other powerful ganking tools the enemy team might have at a usually lower overall cooldown. Also, with First Strike and Ignite, you can burst so many people down and continue to build a lead for yourself. Let's give Sylas a rating for his ability to support in the early game, which will slot at an A+. In terms of early games, few off-meta supports have the same potential in my eyes as Sylas. In fact, if you are better than your opponent, then he'd easily be S+ tier for me. The problem really boils down to, can you hit that chain on his E? Because if you can't, then you can be a bit useless. If the enemies have powerful ults, however, then you can actually still be useful even if you're behind, so I won't rate him any lower. I do wonder though, if you do get a lead as Sylas, is he able to carry it into the
Great Mage Rebellion starts now!
In the late game, responsibilities of a support like to rate include their ability to get picks and to teamfight. Like I always say, roaming and getting picks are very, very similar. The main difference comes from people having more access to items as well as their ultimates. Now normally that is a problem for supports, as they will be getting more and more outclassed. But if you were able to style on your bot lane opponents, then getting picks actually becomes quite fun because you have the potential to do it all by yourself with the amount of damage you can dish out. Especially when it comes to that fight for vision with the enemy support. People always joke about supportal combat, and how it's two people doing no damage to one another. But as Sylas, you actually have a great chance to blow up enemy supports that you see if they are isolated from their team. For getting picks, I will give Sylas an S+. He has a glaring weakness, which will be evident in the next section, but as long as you're going after one person, then this champion truly can shine either by himself or with the help of a teammate. Now let's talk about team fighting, where support's responsibilities include engaging, peeling, and sometimes dealing damage. The potential downside of Sylas as a support is his lack of AoE CC. Most engaged supports usually have ways to crowd control multiple foes, but Sylas does lack that in his basic abilities. That being said, a lot of enemy supports have very powerful engage ultimates, which Sylas has no problem helping himself to. His rating for engage really will vary depending on who you are playing against. But because he has the potential to be a powerful engager, I'll give him an A rating here. If you're playing against a Malphite support, you'll just be the better version of him. But if you're playing against a Nidalee support, then your engage will be severely lacking. Before a big objective fight, you want to try and steal that good ultimate, and then flank if possible, because if you engage head on and the enemy has peel, there's a good chance they will just blow you up before you get anything productive done. Speaking of peel, you might expect Sylas to struggle just as hard here as he did in lane. While that is partially true, he should have access to more ultimates, so his ability to peel will really depend on who he is playing against, just like engaging. A Kayle or Lulu ult would be massive in protecting your carry, but because there are less peel ultimates overall, I will only give him a B here. The people you will be wanting to peel off of your carries will also usually be able to outplay your E, and not having point and click CC can suck. Although, once again, you could get it by stealing an ult. Finally, let's talk about Sylas and his ability to deal damage. In the early game, it's truly ludicrous with first strike, and people being squishy, but as the game goes on, you can start feeling his lack of levels kick in, and if you can't one-shot someone, then you're usually too squishy to get out in time. Now I ended up playing a lot of Sylas support as it's just so much fun, and one way you can cheat the system is by building a Dark Seal and later upgrading it into Medjai's if you have a decent amount of stacks, and if you can keep them and reach that 25 stack range, you'll be truly blowing people up. At the same time, it's also really easy to lose the stacks as you have to go in to do things, so be wary of that. For dealing damage, I will give Sylas Support an A+. He's less reliable than the poke supports who can deal damage from a million miles away, but with a lead, few champions can burst someone harder than a Sylas can, especially if you can get access to a high damage scaling ultimate. Before we rate Sylas's overall ability to support, let's take a look at the runes and items that I would recommend. There are 3 rune paths that I see as being viable. The one I didn't try that I will quickly mention is Conqueror, as Sylas can stack it fairly quickly, and it could be decent in very scrappy melee bot lanes. But in general, it's not my favorite, and it's much harder to stack later in the game. Now my favorite rune page of choice is First Strike Sylas, which I've been mentioning a lot throughout the video, but it honestly makes him feel very strong. Dealing 9% extra damage is no joke, especially when your whole combo is pretty much finished in 3 seconds, meaning you get full benefit from the rune as well as an extra bit of income that is really welcome in the support role. If you want to roam a lot, I would actually take Hex Flash so you can get over walls and so that you can build boots to get around the map. But if you want to be really greedy, Magical Footwear feels very nice to have as it lets you bypass boots for a bit to concentrate on building your damage items, which is also why Futures Market is solid, as a problem with the support role is finding enough gold to get components, and Futures Market can let you cheat the system a bit to be stronger earlier. Secondarily, I like to take Sudden Impact for a bit more damage, as well as Ultimate Hunter, as it's truly a guilty pleasure of mine, but with all 5 stacks, your ulti really feels like it's up every 20 seconds or so, which is just insane. Now another rune page you can go for is Electrocute, in lanes or games where you don't think you can get that first strike off. But I do believe it feels weaker, and you will notice that you are missing a bit of the cash flow you get from the first strike keystone. Now let's talk about items. Like with Rumble, I found Spell Thief's Edge to be the best choice, as it gives you the most damage possible early on, and you can stack it fairly easily with your combo or with your Q when the enemy ADC is trying to farm. On your first back, the 2 items I usually built were Tier 1 Boots and Dark Seal. But if you can only afford one, I'd go for the Dark Seal. You want to snowball the game as Sylas Support, and Dark Seal, while risky, is your best bet in doing so. Then I usually like to upgrade boots, and I find that Ionian Boots of Lucidity are still a solid option due to their cheaper price, and the CDR is very nice for Sylas, as it lets you get another rotation of abilities to get more kills. but because Sylas is melee and will be in harm's way, mercs or steel caps can be good if that would help you survive against mostly magic or AD comps. I also want mythics, of which there are a couple I think you can explore. My personal favorite was Night Harvester, as its mythic passive gives you more CDR, and that little bit of burst damage you can get from your item pairs fairly nicely with your first strike, and overall potential to blow people up. If you can get an early Hextech alternator, it's especially nice, as it can help you farm that first strike gold to get the rest of your very expensive items. Another nice thing about Night Harvester is how easy it is to use, but if you want to be more of a playmaker, then the mythics of Hextech Protobelt or Everfrost are quite solid, as Protobelt's dash can help you land your E on long-range targets, and Everfrost is nice in giving you the potential for more CC. Now that I'm looking at the items, I actually see a small case for trying out Rod of Ages. It's a little bit troll unless you're really fed, as you want to get it as early as possible. And the fact that it takes 10 minutes to get the full effect from the item when you want to snowball the game as fast as possible also makes it very meh. Truthfully, he can use all of the AP mythics, so if there's ever one that is super OP or good in the situation, feel free to try it out. I still like Night Harvester though, for that one-shot potential, and the ability to maximize your first strike gold. The last mythic I will mention is Evenshroud, if you really want to embrace the support playstyle, which I respect, and it could be decent as the item is cheaper, and if the enemy has CC ultimates, it definitely could be okay. But the peaks you can have with full AP Sylas support would not be there, so it's not my favorite. Now oftentimes you won't have too much gold because of how expensive your mythic is, but if you are fed, you will want to build more damage with AP items that make sense for the situation you are in. I really like upgrading my Darksteel to Medjai's, because while it is super risky, if you can reach that 25 stack mark, you will most likely just win, and it's the cheapest legendary at 1600 total cost. If you do go Medjai's, then I would recommend going for Zhonya's afterwards, so you can still go for all-in plays, while having a better chance of surviving and saving your stacks. Now that we've talked about the runes and items, let's give Sylas an overall rating for his ability to support, which will slot at an S. Honestly, in terms of off-meta supports, he has the chance to be S+ in many games if you can outplay your opponent. Sylas does a ridiculous amount of damage in a short period of time, as long as you can hit that chain. Would I recommend you play Sylas support? Absolutely. Even if you don't get a lead in lane, you can actually still be useful by building an Evenshroud and looking to get picks for your team. Also, if the enemies have good ultimates to steal, then of course he can still excel, so if you can wait to pick Sylas until you see the enemy team comp, it would be best. Because once the enemy team sees the Sylas, they will start picking the most random champions just to deny good ults. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and would leave it a like, that would be amazing. And if you would consider subscribing, that would make my day. We also have a Discord, link in the description, so feel free to check that one out if you want to chat. With the completion of Sylas, we have now reached 50 champions rated in the support role, which is awesome. In order to celebrate that accomplishment, we're going to go back in time and replay and re-rank all the champions, as a lot of things have changed since I've started the journey. I'll also be trying to prepare the next batch of new supports so that we can reach the accomplishment of rating all champions in the support role. Again, thanks for watching, and I want to wish you good luck and have fun if you're playing Sylas support yourself. You might need it.